That mud-covered monstrosity is dragging down our property values, Brenda Sullivan barked, jabbing a shaking finger at my Jeep like it had just committed a felony in broad daylight. HOA president, local tyrant, queen of clipboards, call her what you want. But that woman had a voice like a chainsaw chewing through sheet metal. I stood in my driveway, still in my work boots, wiping grease from my hands with an old rag when she slammed a fine notice into my chest hard enough to crumple it. You've got until sundown, Carter. I'm calling a tow truck, and maybe the sheriff if I feel generous. The thing is, she did call. Pulled out her phone like she was about to launch a nuclear strike. Thumb hovered over the dial pad, fire in her eyes. But that's when the whole thing turned sideways. Because from behind the screen door, leaning heavily on a cane, came the last person she ever expected to see. My grandfather, Walter Hayes, 84 years old, bad hip, sharper than a damn tack. The second he stepped onto the porch, it was like someone hit the mute button on Brenda's rage. Her hand started to shake. The phone slipped from her fingers and hit the concrete with a muted clack. Her lips parted, breath-catching. No, it can't be," she stammered, stumbling backward like he was the ghost of some forgotten lawman come to collect. Grandpa just tapped his cane once on the wood, slow and deliberate. "Afternoon, Brenda." That's all he said. Just that. And Brenda. This woman who once fined the Johnsons $300 because their welcome mat was too whimsical, turned and ran. Not walked, not huffed away in a flurry of threats. She ran. Clip-clopped back across the sidewalk like her heels were on fire. And I just stood there, mouth open, the crumpled fine still in my hand, trying to process what the hell had just happened. Now, you're probably wondering, what in God's name could make a woman like Brenda flee from an old man in orthopedic shoes? That's the question, isn't it? That's the hook. What did she see when she looked at Walter Hayes? Was it the tilt of his chin, the stillness in his stance, the way he didn't flinch? Maybe it was the glint of something long buried. Authority. Real authority. Not the kind you print out on HOA letterhead. The kind forged in long nights, hard calls, and lines you don't cross unless you want someone like him at your door. She didn't say another word that day, just disappeared down the sidewalk. Across the street, I caught Sarah Bennett watching from her porch, coffee mug in hand, smirk barely contained. "That was something," she called over. "She ever run like that during cardio class?" Brenda returned the next morning, clipboard reloaded, lips pursed so tight it looked like she'd swallowed a lemon whole. She strutted up my driveway with all the swagger of someone trying to erase yesterday's humiliation. Her pantsuit, today a particularly aggressive shade of lilac, swished like saber cloth. "Good morning, Ethan," she said, in the same tone you'd use to greet a rabid raccoon. "Your vehicle remains in violation. Loud, dirty, improperly parked, and..." She glanced down at my custom Liberty 22 plate, provocatively personalized. I nearly laughed. Provocative? Brenda, it's a tribute to Grandpa's old department. That Jeep's done more for this neighborhood than you have. Her nostrils flared like a bull spotting red. "You've received 3 separate complaints this week alone." "Yeah," I said. "One from the trash can inspector, one from the mailbox alignment committee, and one from the binocular watchtower you." Brenda stepped in closer. "You think this is a joke, Mr. Carter? This is a community, place of order, structure." "You mean fear," I replied, not missing a beat. "You fine people into silence. You turn little things into violations and act like you're upholding the Constitution." She didn't respond. Instead, she handed me another notice. This time, a $200 fine, and, to my complete astonishment, pulled out her phone and started recording me. "This is Ethan Carter," she announced like a news anchor reporting a tornado, resident of 47 Maple Drive, documenting his repeated non-compliance and antisocial behavior. I leaned into the lens, deadpan. 3 days ago, I helped Mrs. Chun fix her porch railing. Last week, I changed the Johnson's flat tire. That antisocial enough for you? Irrelevant, she snapped. You're in violation. The camera stayed on me for another 10 seconds before she pivoted and stalked back to her car. Sarah wandered over again, shaking her head. She fined me $50 last month. Wrong shade of green on my trash bin. You're kidding, I said. Nope. Forest green, not hunter green. Apparently that's an aesthetic conflict. I looked down at the fine in my hand. Vague language, no measurements, no photos, just vague accusations. If my Jeep's a criminal, I muttered. Her lawn is a totalitarian regime. Sarah laughed, but there was worry in her eyes. Be careful, Ethan. She's driven out 3 families in the last 2 years. One got hit with $5,000 in fines for planting roses without approval. I didn't take it seriously. Not yet. I figured I could out-stubborn her. Figured she'd get bored and move on. But that night, when I was washing the Jeep out of pure spite, I noticed something strange. A blinking red light beneath the bumper. I slid underneath and found it. A GPS tracker. Magnets. Waterproof. Industrial grade. This wasn't someone just being nosy. This was stalking. And that's when it stopped being funny. That's when the idea of just ignore her evaporated. I looked over at the garage, where Lily's pink bicycle leaned against the wall. My daughter, 8 years old, staying with me this weekend. And someone thought it was okay to follow us around? I yanked the device free and stared at it like it might explain itself. You picked the wrong guy, Brenda, I growled. Because here's the thing about me. I might let a lot slide. But when you go after my family, that's when I stop being polite. The next day I started digging. And not just into Brenda's rulebook. Into her past. Into the HOA's bylaws. Into every name on the board and the last 10 years of meeting notes. And that's when I realized she hadn't just built a neighborhood. She'd built a kingdom. Fines weren't enforcement, they were income. Fear wasn't a byproduct, it was policy. And people had been too tired, too scared, or too polite to push back. But not anymore. And this is where I want you to really lean in because I know some of you have been through this. Maybe not the exact details, maybe not a Jeep or a GPS, but something close. A neighbor with too much time and not enough soul. A petty tyrant who uses rules like weapons. You sit on your porch, you keep your head down, and you wonder how it got like this. You tell yourself it's not worth the fight. And maybe most days it isn't. But some days it is. Because there's still something sacred about a man's home. About freedom, not just in some abstract patriotic sense, but in the small things, the right to drive what you want, to park where it's allowed, to help a neighbor without being watched like a criminal. Brenda didn't see that, but she would. Because the next HOA meeting was coming up. And what she didn't know, what she couldn't possibly guess, was that Grandpa hadn't just retired to drink coffee and feed birds. No, Walter Hayes still had friends. Still had favors to call. Still had one more badge in the drawer, if you catch my meaning. And me? I had evidence. I had allies. And I had a whole lot of patience stored up for just this kind of war. That day in the driveway wasn't the end of something. It was the beginning. The moment Brenda ran from a man with a cane, that was the first crack in her armor. And once that armor breaks, even a single spark can set a whole empire on fire. The wind that morning smelled like rain and concrete. I remember that clearly because I stood at the edge of my driveway with a trash bag in one hand and a notice tacked to my mailbox that hadn't been there the night before. Another fine. This time for non-standard garbage receptacle placement. I hadn't even taken the can to the curb yet. Brenda had snapped a photo of it beside my garage and time-stamped the violation like she was building a court case. But this wasn't about trash. It was about pressure. She was escalating. And in the back of my mind, I knew I'd crossed some invisible line. One that wasn't written in the HOA guidelines but lived deep in the bones of petty tyrants like Brenda Sullivan. She didn't like being rattled. And that moment she dropped her phone when Grandpa walked out, that moment had humiliated her in front of her own shadow. So now she was lashing out, trying to provoke me into a mistake. I didn't give her one. I smiled. Waved at her little minion patrol who parked diagonally across the street in that beige Toyota with tinted windows. I went about my morning as if I didn't just find a second GPS tracker wedged under my daughter's bike seat. Yeah, you read that right. Not the Jeep. Not my truck. Her pink Schwinn with streamers on the handlebars and training wheels still scuffed from last summer. That was the moment I felt something in me break. Not loudly, not dramatically, just a quiet, surgical snap. The kind of break a man feels when his line is crossed not once, but again and again until there's nothing left to retreat to. I didn't tell Lily, of course. I just told her we were going to stay at Grandpa's place for a while. Closer to the hills, more trees, more space to ride. She was thrilled. Walter, on the other hand, saw straight through me the second we stepped inside. "You look like a man chewing glass," he said, pouring 2 coffees and setting one in front of me. "And your hands are shaking." I didn't deny it. I just slid the tracker across the table. His eyes narrowed. "Where was this?" I pointed. "Under Lily's bike seat." He didn't curse, didn't gasp. He just nodded slowly, then stood up and walked to the garage. When he came back, he had a metal box the size of a lunch pail. "This," he said, "is a frequency scanner from my old unit. Dusty, but still angry enough to pick up a sneeze in China if you point it right." We started scanning. Within 10 minutes, we'd identified at least 4 more signal sources pinging from around my house. One from my bird feeder, one from a fake rock in my backyard, 2 from under the porch. It wasn't surveillance anymore. It was intimidation, deliberate, coordinated, illegal. Walter leaned back, tapping his temple. "This isn't just Brenda. Someone's helping her. Someone who knows how to plant and track and sweep clean." I nodded. HOA's just the suit. But the hand inside the glove? That's the part one wanna see. So we built a plan. Not revenge. Not yet. Just information. Because here's what 30 years of watching men ruin themselves taught me. Power doesn't scream. It whispers. And people like Brenda, they don't protect power with honesty. They protect it with paperwork, confusion, and fear. So I started attending meetings, sat in the back, took notes, listened, asked polite questions. Nothing aggressive, just enough to get their attention. And sure enough, within a week, I was getting polite visits from neighbors I hadn't seen in years. One by one, they'd knock, ask how I was holding up, then quietly, nervously, admit their own run-ins. She fined us for wind chimes. We had to pay $600 because our mailbox was 2 inches taller than regulation. She threatened to report us to child services because our dog barked during her yoga Zoom. And every time they looked ashamed, like they were the problem, like they'd done something wrong by existing in the wrong shade of beige. That shame? That's the leash. And I wasn't interested in wearing one. Then came the letter, hand-delivered. No return address. Inside, a typed note. Sell the Jeep. Leave the neighborhood. Or the next violation will involve CPS. No signature. No contact. Just pure, calculated fear. They were threatening to involve Child Protective Services. Over a Jeep. Over a man refusing to bow his head. And I'll tell you right now, there's a special kind of rage that bubbles up when someone threatens your child. It's slow, cold, surgical, like your entire nervous system recalibrates around a single, clear purpose. I called Sarah, asked her to bring coffee and the good cookies. She knew that meant war room mode. When she arrived, we went through every document I'd gathered. Brenda's fine logs, meeting minutes, spending reports. That's when Sarah found it. A string of invoices paid out to a company called Civic Guardian Consulting. Vague description, Community Enforcement Services. No address, no web presence. But the amounts were consistent. $1, $500 a month. Stretching back over 2 years. Walter checked the name through an old contact in the county records office. Turns out, Civic Guardian had been registered to a P.O. box that linked to a dissolved private security firm, shut down after a lawsuit involving illegal surveillance. That's who was planting trackers. That's who Brenda had on payroll. And the money? It wasn't coming from her personal account. It was coming out of the HOA's Community Safety Fund. That night, we installed cameras around my house. Motion triggered, hidden, fed into a cloud server Walter had set up on a laptop older than some marriages. Within 72 hours, we caught them. 2 men, black hoodies, no markings, no plates on the car. They scoped out the porch, tried to disable the feed, then vanished. But not before one of them looked straight into the lens. No mask, just a smug little smirk like he knew we were watching and didn't care. Walter froze the frame, zoomed in. "That's ex-military," he muttered. "That walk, that posture. She hired someone trained." I looked at my daughter, asleep on the couch, then back at the screen. "We're done playing polite," I said. "Time to make Brenda famous." But first, I needed proof that would stand. Not just a video, not just suspicion. I needed someone inside the HOA, someone close. And that's where Diane came in, Brenda's assistant. Quiet, nervous, but not blind. She'd always seemed uncomfortable at the meetings, always hesitated before signing things. I approached her in the grocery store parking lot, calm, measured. "Diane," I said, "you ever wonder what Brenda's hiding in those files you're told not to open?" Her eyes widened, but she didn't walk away. 3 days later, an unmarked envelope appeared on my windshield. Inside, photocopies, dozens of them, internal emails, spreadsheets, Brenda's signature approving payments she had no authority to make, notes referencing residents as liabilities. One line that chilled me: "If Carter continues to resist, accelerate phase 2. I didn't know what phase 2 was, but I knew it wouldn't be legal. So now we had enough to go public. But I wanted one more thing. One last piece. The original HOA charter. Because rumor had it Walter helped write it back in the 80s. And if that was true and Brenda had rewritten it illegally, then everything she'd done was null and void. Walter went digging through his attic, through boxes labeled Army and Dad's shop, and finally found a dusty red binder marked Founding Documents. There it was. Black ink, yellow paper, notarized and signed. HOA presidents were subject to annual votes and financial audits. Brenda had skipped both for 3 years. Now we had the match. The fuel was already there. All we had to do was light it, and we would. At the next HOA picnic, open to all residents, cameras, witnesses, neighbors tired of being quiet. And Walter, he had a uniform to press. Because sometimes the past doesn't stay buried. It walks back in when you need it most. The day we broke into the HOA office wasn't planned. It wasn't noble, and it sure as hell wasn't legal. But it was necessary. I remember Sarah pacing in front of the gas station just off Route 17, clutching a folder full of anonymous emails and invoices like it was radioactive. She looked at me, her voice low but fierce. "Ethan, this goes deeper than fines or HOA politics. They're laundering something. She's using HOA funds to move money that doesn't belong to her." That was the last push I needed. Not the GPS trackers, not the threats, not even the file about Lily's school. No, this was about every neighbor who'd ever had to sell their home over a $1,200 landscaping violation. This was about dignity, about people who served their country, worked their whole lives, only to be policed by a woman with a clipboard and a God complex. We scoped the office for 2 days. It was a small, single-story space that looked like an insurance branch nobody visited. A community center, they called it. Open twice a week, locked down tight the rest of the time. Security lights, no alarms, just a camera pointed at the front entrance that hadn't blinked in weeks. Walter confirmed it wasn't recording anymore. He knew the brand. He'd used one just like it at the department 20 years back. He was with us that night, not breaking in. No, he stayed in the car with the scanner, listening for any surprises on the police band. He wasn't thrilled. "You're pushing your luck?" he muttered as I pulled my hoodie up. "You're a father, Ethan, not a damn vigilante." I met his eyes. "And she's a criminal, not a neighbor." We slipped around the back where the old janitor door had a rusted hinge and a cheap lock. Took less than 20 seconds with the tool Sarah's brother lent us. Inside, the air smelled like toner and stale coffee. There were motivational posters on the wall. One of them read, "Civility is power." I nearly laughed. We went straight to Brenda's office. It was locked. Of course it was. But Sarah had eyes. "The vent," she whispered, pointing to the return duct near the floor. "Her desk lines up to it." If we can snake the phone through, we record everything. And we did. She tied her phone to a piece of wire, dropped it through the vent, and maneuvered until the camera faced up under the desk. 10 minutes of footage. Every binder, every drawer, every post-it scribbled with names and numbers. One stood out, an old leather folder marked exemptions. Inside were records of residents whose violations had been cleared, dozens of them, all men, all white, all members of some community excellence council Brenda had founded. Translation: a shadow club of compliant homeowners who got immunity while the rest of us got bled dry. But that wasn't the worst of it. In the back drawer was a thumb drive. No label. Sarah pocketed it and we bolted. Back at Walter's, we plugged it in. Encrypted, of course. But it had a single unencrypted folder, evidence. And inside were photos. Dozens. Screenshots of camera feeds from around the neighborhood. Some from public spaces. But others, they were from inside homes. Hidden cameras. Bedrooms. Kitchens. Walter's hands trembled. She bugged residents? I stared at the screen, sick rising in my throat. This isn't HOA work. This is federal prison work. And then came the video. A clip labeled Carter_Fire Department_2021. I clicked it. It was me, at the fire station fundraiser, handing out waters, helping an old vet to his car. But the audio had been altered. Someone had spliced my voice to make it sound like I was mocking the guy. Sarah covered her mouth. They're fabricating evidence. For what? Walter looked at me. To paint you as a threat. To justify what they do next. The next morning, Brenda doubled down. 3 more fines. An official letter from a law firm claiming I was violating zoning codes by using my garage for non-residential purposes. I ran a damn hobby woodshop, not a meth lab. But to her, it didn't matter. The point wasn't legality. It was psychological warfare. And now I had proof. But no way to release it without risking blowback. That's when Walter made a call. Said he knew someone who owed him a favor from back in his sheriff days. He's not a cop anymore, he told me. But he's got reach. Media reach. Real reach. 3 days later, a journalist named Cal showed up in a rusty pickup with a recorder and a quiet, hungry look. He listened, took notes, verified, and then he asked me something I didn't expect. Are you willing to let this go public? Let your name be attached to it. I paused, thought of Lily, her smile, the way she always said, Daddy fixes things. And I said, yes, because this isn't about me anymore. Cal grinned. Good. Then let's break the wheel. But it wasn't over. That night, Sarah's house got broken into. They didn't steal anything, just trashed her files. Left a message written on her whiteboard in red marker. Keep digging. You'll find a grave. She called me shaking. I told her to come stay at Walter's. I'd already started building a wall of folders, everything duplicated, printed, stored in triplicate. If they wanted to burn this down, I was going to make them walk through hell first. Then Diane called. From a burner number. I can't be seen with you, but I've found something. The new charter Brenda's been enforcing. It's fake. She drafted it herself. Never ratified. Never filed. I asked how she knew. Because the real one's in my garage. I kept a copy after Brenda fired the last treasurer. She thought I shredded it. I didn't. She paused. You've got the match. I've got the gas. You ready to burn it all down? The next HOA picnic was 1 week away. Open to all residents. No agenda. Just sunshine, burgers, and lemonade. The perfect place to drop a bomb. Walter pulled his old uniform from the closet. It still fit. Barely. But the badge still shone. I looked at him and saw something I hadn't in years. That gleam. That spark. You sure about this? I asked. He smiled. Son, I've spent too many years watching this country forget what decency looks like. It's time someone reminded them. I nodded. Let's give them a show. And that's what we planned. Every lie, every file, every violation exposed under the open sky. Brenda wouldn't see it coming. But the neighborhood? They were gonna see everything. No more whispers. No more fear. Just truth. Loud, undeniable, and long overdue. The morning of the HOA picnic felt like a storm that hadn't quite announced itself. Not in the clouds, but in the way people moved. Stiffer, quieter, like they all knew something was coming but couldn't name it. The banners were up, Maple Ridge Community Day, fluttering on PVC poles with forced cheer. There was a bouncy castle in the cul-de-sac, 2 grills smoking near the community center entrance, and Brenda Sullivan, pristine as ever, was holding court in front of the welcome table, shaking hands like she was running for a seat in Congress. She wore a powder blue suit and pearls, the kind of outfit meant to signal control. But what she didn't realize was the ground under her power had already started to crack. I walked in with Walter and Sarah right behind me, and I could feel the eyes tracking us. Neighbors who had whispered behind blinds now watching openly, wondering what was about to go down. Some nodded. Others just stared. It didn't matter. We weren't there for handshakes. Walter wore his old sheriff's uniform. Cleaned, pressed, and absolutely deliberate. The moment Brenda saw him, her smile faltered. Just a flicker, but enough. A crack. Sarah peeled off toward the crowd with copies of the original HOA charter. Diane was already at the lemonade table, ready to start handing out the flash drives. And me? I carried a binder under my arm labeled Proof, because I wasn't there to make a speech. I was there to show the truth, unfiltered and undeniable. Brenda caught up with me near the sidewalk chalk station. "Ethan," she said, all sugar and thorns, "let's not make a scene. Today's about community, not conflict." I looked at her like she'd lost her mind. "You've been staging a scene for 2 years, Brenda. I'm just here to pull the curtain back." Her eyes narrowed. "I hope you understand the consequences of slander. Legal consequences. You should be more worried about the federal ones," I said. Then I walked straight to the community table and took the mic. The speaker system cracked a little. Someone turned down the music. Kids kept bouncing in the inflatable castle, blissfully unaware. "Folks," I began. "My name's Ethan Carter. I've lived here 5 years. I helped pour concrete for the new benches on Maple. I rebuilt the Jacksons' garage door last fall when the wind took it out. I love this neighborhood. But I'm here today because I've seen it change. Not by accident. Not by time. But by control." I held up the binder. "What you're about to hear may sound unbelievable. I get it. But everything I say is backed by documents you can read for yourselves. In fact, many of you already have them in your inbox." Murmurs. Phones came out. Diane had sent the file drop 5 minutes earlier. I continued, flipping open the binder. "Over the past 2 years, our HOA president has funneled tens of thousands of dollars to a private surveillance group posing as a consulting firm. She's used that money to spy on residents, including placing tracking devices on vehicles and, in at least 2 cases, inside private homes." Gasped. One woman dropped her lemonade. "The fines? Most of them were illegal, based on a fraudulent charter Brenda rewrote and enforced without a board vote. We found the original charter still valid, and it says every major decision, including surveillance and finance, must be voted on by the homeowners. That hasn't happened in 3 years." Brenda stepped forward, trying to wrench the mic from my hand. Walter moved in front of her, slow but immovable, his badge glinting in the sun. "I wouldn't," he said, in a tone that stopped grown men in their tracks during bar fights and bank standoffs. Brenda froze. Her voice shook. "This is a circus. None of this is true. That charter's outdated. The board was never elected. I cut in. The last real election was 5 years ago. Since then, you've appointed replacements, silenced votes, and buried every financial audit request. You've weaponized the HOA against your own neighbors. And today it ends." I held up a flash drive. "This contains surveillance footage, forged violation notices, financial statements, and emails from Brenda's office authorizing it all. It's already been shared with every local news outlet and 3 state investigators." People started shifting, looking at each other. Brenda turned pale. "You won't get away with this," she hissed. "You think you can turn this community against me?" "No," I said, stepping back. "You already did. I'm just letting them see it. That's when Sarah stepped forward with her laptop and pointed to the pop-up screen set near the ice cream stand. The one Brenda had planned to use for her slideshow about HOA achievements. Instead, it now displayed live images of the surveillance footage. One by one. A feed from the Jacksons' backyard. A zoom-in from the Chun family's patio. Then my own garage. Brenda lunged for the cord. Walter stepped in again, his voice louder now. You touch that, and I'll place you under citizen's arrest pending formal charges. That was when the crowd turned. Not with pitchforks, just voices. Calm, loud, unified. We want to vote, someone shouted. Emergency session, another yelled. Impeach. Audit now. Brenda tried to leave, but two men from the crowd blocked her car. Walter pulled out his phone, not to call police, but his old friend at the state attorney's office. Now's a good time to follow up on that folder I sent, he said. You'll want to send someone down here. Soon. Sarah walked up beside me. We did it, she whispered. Not yet, I said. She still has claws. Because I knew Brenda. She wasn't the kind to vanish without a parting shot. Sure enough, that night, I got a letter. Not emailed. Hand-delivered. Just like before. No return address. Inside, a printed still from a security camera. Lily at her school bus stop. Smiling. Innocent. And beneath it, typed in bold, You may have won the crowd, but I still know where your daughter goes. I didn't sleep. Neither did Walter. Or Sarah. I took the photo to Diane. Her face drained. This is from the internal HOA camera system. She had remote access. But the files she used were supposed to be wiped after the upgrade. Not all of them, I said. She kept trophies. We brought it to Cal, the reporter. He said, You're not just dealing with a petty tyrant anymore. She's escalated to criminal intimidation. Walter called in a second favor. This time to the FBI. Because this wasn't just about HOA politics. It was surveillance, extortion, and threats against a child. And now we had public interest, evidence, witnesses, a hero in a sheriff's uniform, and a woman drunk on control, standing right on the edge of a federal investigation. I didn't feel like a hero. I felt tired. But I also felt something stronger. The burn of momentum. The weight of people standing beside me who were done being afraid. The whisper that started months ago had grown into something louder, harder to ignore. And somewhere deep down, I knew we were closer to the end. But not quite there. Brenda had one more move, one more card to play. And when she played it, she'd wish she never had. The morning after the picnic, I opened my front door to a silence that didn't sit right. Not the peaceful kind of silence you earn with hard work and luck, but the kind that follows something breaking, too clean, too careful. The paper was already on the porch, folded, plastic-wrapped, heavy with dew. The headline wasn't what hit me first, it was the photo. My face. On the front page. Local HOA president accused of illegal surveillance. Whistleblower claims retaliation. They used the shot from the community day, me holding the binder, mouth mid-sentence. But it was the subheadline that set my gut on fire. Carter family ties raise questions of bias, financial motive. I flipped the paper over and read the quote attributed to Brenda's legal liaison. Mr. Carter has long had a personal vendetta against the HOA board. He's used his grandfather's history in law enforcement to manipulate neighbors and fabricate a conspiracy for personal gain. We urge residents to consider the full picture. My hands curled around the paper until it crumpled. It was her final move. A smear campaign. But not against me, against my family. The one line that stopped my heart. Mr. Carter's sister, Diane Carter, was previously removed from HOA accounting over behavioral concerns and may be complicit in recent document leaks. Diane wasn't just my sister. She was the one who gave us the key to burn all this down. And now Brenda was trying to paint her as unstable, dangerous, untrustworthy. That same morning, Diane called. Her voice cracked on the first word. They came to my door, Ethan. Two men in suits. Said they were from a private risk assessment firm. Not law enforcement. Just corporate. What did they ask? if I still had any HOA material, if I'd be willing to turn over false documents for review. They had my name, my apartment number, my job schedule. I didn't tell them anything, but she broke off. I think they've been watching me. You're staying here, I said. Pack a bag. I'm picking you up. When I got to her place, she was sitting on the steps outside with a duffel and a tired smile. I knew she wouldn't go quietly, she said, but I didn't think she'd try to break me. She didn't, I said. She pushed too far. Now we hit back with everything. Back at the house, Walter was already making calls. Not local, federal. The contacts you don't pull unless the line's on fire. He wasn't wearing the uniform anymore, but he stood straighter, moved faster. We're done being reactive, he said. We're bringing this to Washington. DOJ has a public corruption tip line and this qualifies. She's abused tax protections, falsified documents, used state resources to target civilians. This isn't HOA drama anymore. It's criminal enterprise. Meanwhile, Sarah worked with Cal, the reporter, to prepare the full release. A digital dossier with files, video, audio, and a timeline that outlined Brenda's abuses like a prosecution map. They scheduled the drop for Friday morning, giving us 48 hours. We spent those 2 days scanning every box, every drive, calling every neighbor with a story, every former board member with a grudge. What we found made our stomachs twist. Brenda had used the HOA to sue a widow into foreclosure over unauthorized garden lighting, and then purchased the property through a shell LLC for half its value. It wasn't just about power. It was profit. It was theft. And it was pattern. But the final blow didn't come from us. It came from someone we never expected. On Thursday evening, as we reviewed the release drafts, my phone buzzed with an unknown number. I answered, and the voice on the other end was low. Male. Cautious. You don't know me. I used to work for Civic Guardian, the security group Brenda hired. I saw your name in the paper. I saw what she's doing. I want to help. I stepped outside and listened as he told me everything. She paid us to install equipment, sure, but she also paid for access, social profiles, location data. One of my old teammates got a job with a telecom company just to help her pull metadata on residents. Call history, browsing behavior. It wasn't just cameras. It was digital fingerprints. And it's not just your neighborhood. My knees went weak. You have proof. I do, he said. But I need protection. Witness status. If I send this, I need to know someone real is watching. I forwarded him to Walter. Within hours, the man's statement was recorded, logged, and transferred to a DOJ investigator. His packet included screenshots of Brenda's email exchanges, payment confirmations, and most damning of all, a list of targeted residents, with my name at the top and a final note that read, "Final phase begins after public blowout. Leverage child if necessary." That was it. The line. The part of her soul she sold to try and break me. She'd planned to use my daughter as leverage. That's when everything in me, every piece of patience, every shred of fear, just burned off. The next morning, the exposé went live. Sarah clicked publish at 6:47 a.m. Within an hour, our phones lit up. Emails from local stations, requests for interviews. Residents came out of their homes like they were blinking into daylight after a long night. A group of veterans on Pine Ridge Drive held a sign that read, "HOA is not equal to dictatorship." A teacher down the street put up a hand-painted banner that said, "We believe Ethan." The community turned. Not slowly, not cautiously, but completely. Brenda tried one last press release, claimed innocence, accused us of hacking, manipulating data, but the damage was done. An unmarked car appeared outside her home. Then another, and another. She was escorted out an hour later in a long coat and dark glasses, flanked by 2 agents. Not handcuffed, not yet, but the message was clear. The fire had reached her front door. As for us, we didn't celebrate. Not like you'd expect. We sat on Walter's porch, Diane beside us, watching Lily ride her bike in circles on the quiet street. It was calm, earned, real. Sarah handed me a cold beer. "You did it," she said. I shook my head. We did it. All of us. You, Diane, Walter. Hell, even Cal. Walter raised his glass. To neighbors who remember what that word's supposed to mean. But just as I leaned back, my phone buzzed. A text. Unknown number. A single sentence. There's more. Brenda wasn't the top. I stared at the screen. My jaw tightened. Then I looked out across the street, past the trees, past the shadows that still lingered. Because every fire reveals more than it burns. And maybe the fight wasn't over. Maybe we'd only just cleared the brush. But one thing was certain. We weren't afraid anymore. Not of fines. Not of names. Not of power misused in the dark. Because when men stand together, truly stand, no shadow stands for long.